Thanks for staying with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Well, it is common knowledge that Nigeria's agricultural sector is still largely at the subsistence level, despite the frightening dimensions of our population explosion, especially in the past 50 years. At the moment, there's an estimated 200 million Nigerians, more than 90% of whom are said to be living under the multi-dimensional poverty line, according to the United Nations estimates. In recognition of this, the government of President Bola Tinubu embarked on what it calls the Renewed Hope Agenda from inception to drive socioeconomic development, and a key component of that project is the repositioning of the agriculture sector to serve as a guaranteed source of food and sustenance to millions of the country's citizens. But how far and how well? For an answer to that and more, we're now being joined by Ambassador Segun Alabi, who's the founder and CEO of Davidola Farms, and Dr. Muda Yusuf, the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. Good to have you both with us on the morning show today. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
All right. Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Yusuf. All right. Let's start with you, Dr. Muda Yusuf, before we come to the farmer and the industrialist with us in the studio. To put all this into context, Dr. Yusuf, what would be your overview assessment of the more than 2 years that the current administration has used, particularly as it affects agriculture on the one hand, and then the whole question of food security? If you recall, before state of emergency was declared in Rivers State, the first state of emergency that was actually declared by the president was on food insecurity. And that's almost 2 years, today. How far have we come? And do you see progress in the Renewed Hope Agenda as far as food security is concerned in Nigeria?
Well, it has been very, very challenging because, as we can see, the evidence is out there. We know what it is, particularly with the issue of the cost of food. Now, it is true the president declared the state of emergency on food, and indeed, we even have a committee, a presidential committee being chaired by the vice president, which is saddled with the responsibility of driving, the achievement of the key objectives of the state of emergency. And the good thing about the committee is that, at least by virtue of its composition, it's quite inclusive. We have the coordinating minister as a member of the committee. We have state governors representing different geopolitical zones. We have the private sector. We have the 2 ministers of agriculture. So the fact that the president set up a committee chaired by the vice president, I think it's an indication of the political commitment of government, to the issue of food security. But as we all know, insecurity has been a major issue as far as food security is concerned. Don't forget, agricultural sector accounts for close to 25% of our GDP. And in terms of employment, it employs close to 50% of the population. But the insecurity has been a major issue, around issues of food security. So some progress has been made, but I must say that the security issue has been a major impediment, to the kind of progress that ought to have been made, in the last 2 years. But in addition to that are issues of productivity. Even in locations where we don't have any serious security issues, we have productivity issues. We have the challenges of yield. Because if the yield is very low, it will be very difficult to achieve the objective of food security. Yield with respect to crop production, yield with respect to livestock. So we are still very far behind in terms of improving the yield. And this has to do with the quality of inputs, the quality of seedlings, And again, more importantly, there is the issue of mechanization. I mean, we have a population of over 200 million people, and yet we have an agricultural sector that is still populated by smallholder farmers. You know, the ownership of land or farming environments are so fragmented that they are not, quite amenable to mechanization. And there's no way we can achieve much without mechanization. So it is important that we need to, ensure that we make a lot more progress with respect to mechanization. And more importantly, is to understand that the issue of food security is both the responsibility of the subnationals and the responsibility of the federal government. In fact, for me, the subnationals even have a much bigger role to play. Because first, they have the custody of the land. Second, they are closer to the farmers. They are closer to the operators in the agricultural sector. So there is need for very strong synergy, collaboration between the federal and the state governments. So in terms of policy, of course, the federal has a lot more to do to ensure that you have an appropriate financing framework, for the financing of agricultural sector, an appropriate framework for subsidy regime, an appropriate framework to ensure that the critical inputs that you require for agriculture are provided in good time. And we need a lot of policy instruments to be deployed at the federal level. It could be fiscal policy, monetary policy, our trade policy, even our tax policy. All those policies need to work in tandem to focus specifically on the delivery of the objectives of food security. So broadly speaking, I think some progress has been made, but there's still a whole lot that needs to be done in terms of achieving the objective of food security.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Muda. Quite extensive. And I'd just like to bring Ambassador Segun Alabi into this conversation. And as the founder and CEO of Davidola Farms, of course, we know President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's renewed Hope agenda had a lot to do with ensuring food security for Nigerians through new infrastructure and, of course, more loans being made available. But he also admitted that the issues around insecurity is going to be a major problem towards achieving these goals. Now, we spoke earlier about the Chief of Defense Staff talking about building a wall, just one of the ways that may actually solve some of these issues. But I'd like to ask you, Ambassador Segun, what would you like to see differently being done? We know that several states in Nigeria right now are dealing with major insecurity, and this is affecting our food supply. Benue often it is the food basket of the nation, but how easy is it for these farmers to even access their farmers at a time like this? What would you like as an owner and as someone who is in the sector, what would you like to see done differently when it comes to securing the food in Nigeria?
Well, thank you so much. Just like Dr. Muda rightly said, the major issue of food insecurity in Nigeria today is on the insecurity. Now, we're talking about the Benue, which is the food basket of the nation. What I would like to see differently, because if we don't do it now, the problem will continue and continue and continue. And the population is increasing, and when your population is increasing and cannot match it with the production of food, then there's problem ahead. Right now, what I would advise, or my suggestion, my own opinion, is that, for example, now if farmers are going to the farm and then there is police or soldier or some security personnel in the farm, the farmer will have the confidence to go to the farm. But we cannot tell the farmer to go to the farm when they have been facing a whole lot of challenges. For example, somebody will go to the farm, they will not allow them to work, they will tell them pay some certain amount of money for you to even harvest your food. So insecurity of life is the first thing, and until the government are able, I know government are doing what they can do and they are doing it every day, but, and I also want to add this, that security in Nigeria is a collective effort. The government will do their own, and the villagers, the community also have to do their own. Because there is an adage that said, a thief cannot come from outside and steal something without involving the thief in the house. So security in Nigeria is a collective effort, and I expect government to do more so that we can solve this insecurity in Nigeria.
But do you have a personal, as a farmer, do you have a personal experience as to what actually shows whether we are making progress in the farms or not? Because some of the things that you have painted show, people will argue that, oh, that happens in some northern part of Nigeria. But would that be the situation here in the southern part as well, as far as security is concerned?
As far as security issue is concerned, it's happened majorly in the northern part of Nigeria, on the northeast. In the west, we don't really have much insecurity. For example, where we are in Ogun State, we've not had any issue as regards insecurity. But you know, in Nigeria, we have comparative advantage. There are things that can grow in the north that cannot grow here. So if the major food production states in Nigeria are having a whole lot of insecurity, then there is a problem. So the more channel, more advantage or more solutions should be channeled to the north, where we are having this major issue, most especially Benue. We've heard what has been happening for the past 4 weeks now in Benue, and then it's still happening. What is the government doing about that, so that we can solve this problem and solve it once and for all?
Now, Dr. Buda Yusuf, I want to bring you back into the conversation now, because I want to move away from insecurity alone. And, you know, I want us to focus on this 2 years of President Tinubu's Renewed Hope agenda. One of the major things that has been celebrated is the Lagos-Calabar, highway. That was a huge part of the celebrations. And I'm focusing on this because I want you to speak to us a little bit about the infrastructural deficits that are affecting farming and food security in Nigeria. We have infrastructural deficits in terms of transportation, in terms of storage of food, but in terms of preventing loss of harvest, but also in terms of preventing flooding, because now the NEMA has said that over 1,200 communities in Nigeria are at risk of flooding. And we've seen what's happened in Niger State. We've seen what's about to happen in Benue State. So when it comes to infrastructural deficits, do you believe that both the federal government and the state government are doing enough to prevent food security from getting worse, or food insecurity, rather, from getting worse in Nigeria?
Well, the federal government and the states are doing their best, but I think it can be better. When we talk about food security, of course, investments in all these expressways are important. But the issue is that when it comes to crop farming is basically a rural activity. So, issue of rural roads connecting the rural communities to the cities is of a much bigger priority when it comes to issue of food security. You talked about post-harvest losses. One of the reasons we have huge post-harvest losses, which has been estimated at about between 30 to 40%, is the fact that there is no connectivity. Because in having this conversation, yes, we have insecurity, but we still have areas in Nigeria that don't have so much of the challenge of insecurity. So how do we optimize productivity in those locations? So connectivity between the rural communities and the cities, because access to market is critical for agricultural sector performance. So the state governments in particular should give a lot more emphasis to connecting the rural communities to the cities, to the markets. Because there is a tendency on the part of many of the subnationals to concentrate infrastructure provision on the state capitals, on the major cities. Whereas the critical segments of the population that are involved in farming, in agriculture, are in the rural areas. So that connectivity is extremely very important. It is important to invest in all these expressways and so on to connect the entire country. But we should have, almost a commensurate emphasis, focus on connecting the rural communities to the cities. That is extremely very important. And also very important, apart from this infrastructure, is also the capacity, to ensure that we have more technology application into agriculture. We have had several conversations around genetic engineering. This GMO thing, there have been debates around it back and forth, whether it is good. We should come to terms with the reality that unless you use technology in a particular sector, there's no way we can make progress in this time and age. If you look at all the sectors of the economy, the sector that is lagging behind the most in terms of leveraging technology is agriculture. We are still carrying hoes and cutlasses in this day and age. There's no way we can make progress, and there's no way we can attract our youth, the younger population, into agriculture. And that is why we have the bulk of our human resources. And in order to deploy them to agriculture, we need to make agricultural sector very attractive. And the way to make it attractive to the younger population is to apply technology. So we need to do a lot more to ensure that we have technology application so that we can sensitize the younger generation, the youth, to go into agriculture. So we talk of subsidy. We need a lot of subsidy. If you go around the world, one of the sectors that attract the highest level of subsidy is agriculture. In the EU, in US, we are talking about billions of US dollars or euro. So the same thing should apply here, particularly at the input level. We are talking about pesticides, we are talking about the tractors, harvesters, fertilizer, all those things. They need to be subsidized in a way to support the cost of agricultural production. That way we'll be able to bring out the subsidy also has to be managed in a way that is not vulnerable to abuse. Because we know what kind of problem, subsidy can come with when it comes to managing subsidy regimes. But we can do it in a way that will not create problem, that will not, be subject to abuse. So we need to subsidize heavily all the critical inputs into agriculture so that agriculture can be, food security can be assured. And we need to sensitize the population about this pushback on GMOs, the genetic modified products. It's not as bad as people think. And we have an agency, I think Biotechnology Commission or something, that is doing something about this. Because we need technology to transform agriculture. There is no way around that.
All right, Dr. Yusuf, I'll stay with you just for a brief moment so that Ambassador Alabi too can join in the same questions. Just two quick ones, because you commented on the post-harvest losses that Adesua mentioned. I'm sure you are aware of the recent partnership between FAN, Federal Airport Authorities of Nigeria, with the Plateau State government to have what they call the food cargo hub. And the whole idea of it is to cut down on the 3.5 trillion food losses that Nigeria is currently experiencing. So FAN and Plateau State government are going into an agreement to have that in Jos, a cargo hub. What are your thoughts on that sort of an initiative, and how do you think that it can go a long way to solve most of our problems? And then also very quickly, I would like your thoughts on how well you think we're doing in terms of cash crops in Nigeria. Recently, I saw the report showing that what Nigeria recorded in cocoa exporting in 2024 was significantly more than what we did in 2023. But of course, a lot of people are attributing different reasons. They are saying, okay, it's because we devalued the Naira, it's because prices change internationally, not necessarily in terms of volume. But then given your knowledge of the sector, do you think that we're doing well as we ought to? as far as cash crops are concerned in Nigeria, particularly cocoa and a few other ones. Ambassador Alabi too will also weigh in on that, but very quickly from your good self, sir.
Now, the cargo hub initiative between FAN and the Plateau State government is a very good one because logistics is key, particularly when we are talking about the prospect of exporting agricultural products. Because I think when we talk about this cargo thing, I think the focus is a lot more on exports. And the way to support exports of some of these agricultural products is to have that kind of arrangement. And we have quite a number of cargo airports around the country. We have in Ekiti State, I think we have in Ogun State too. And this one in Plateau State is a commendable thing. It's a very good thing from the perspective of exports. But the bigger challenge has to do with post-harvest losses within the country in terms of how you move products from the farm to the market domestically. So the domestic connectivity and the domestic capacity for post-harvest losses is the issue, because what we are discussing here is essentially about the value chain in agriculture. And there has to be sufficient investment at each level of the value chain. There is the level of the production, which we have discussed about ensuring that we improve the yield of the production. That will require technology, improve seedlings, so that the yield per acre can increase. Then after you have got the yield, we need to have systems to be able to preserve those things. That will require some level of other form of infrastructure, like power supply, for instance. If you talk to those who are in the fishery industry, one of their biggest headache now is ability to preserve those things. They are spending so much on diesel to be able to preserve all these cold rooms and all of those things. They make all these fish, poultry products very expensive. So there's also the issue of storage from the point of view of ensuring that we have adequate power supply. So that is also very key. Then there is issue of internal connectivity. That is road linkages within the country. This country is quite vast. Unless you have proper connectivity, and I think the federal government is doing a lot, I must commend the federal government on this road infrastructure. But the federal government alone cannot do it, because you need the subnationals to also consult their own roads to be able to link the express roads. So it has to be both an issue for the subnationals and the federal government in terms of this post-harvest loss, because the speed with which you can deliver the products to the market depends on the quality of the logistics that you have. Then we need to do a lot more about rail infrastructure. In many other economies, the biggest way to link internally, all the local economies internally, is through rail. And rail is much cheaper. It's not vulnerable to all this problem of checkpoints and all of that. So ensuring that you have enough rail connectivity is also part of the things that can happen in order to ensure that we reduce both the cost of logistics and even the post-harvest losses. So those are the things that I think we need to focus on as far as that is concerned. On the cash crops, we have not seen sufficient investment. Again, this requires a lot of support for the farmers. Support from the federal and support from the states, particularly the states. I'm aware that we have seen some initiatives because cash crops also have its own timelines. They don't come as quickly as maize and all these annual crops. If you invest today, you'll be talking about 3, 4, 5 years before you begin to see the results. But we need to see a lot more efforts on cash crops, particularly cocoa. And I know that somewhere in the south, in Edo State and Akwa Ibom, there's a lot of investment also in palm plantation. You know, and we have pockets of private sector investors there that are also doing well. Some of them are even quoted on the stock exchange. But we could do a lot more. Again, this requires a lot of support from the subnationals and also policy support at the federal level. But we are not doing as much as we should. Again, because, there is this federal allocation that all the states are getting. These things also creates some level of complacency when it comes to diversification around in supporting the cash crop production. So those are the issues around the questions you've asked.
All right, Dr. Muda, I think Mr. Shegun Alabi can equally comment on this. But before you do, Mr. Shegun, you made a case for genetically modified foods within Nigeria, saying that we do need technology to help the situation, the food security situation in Nigeria at this time. However, we do know that GMOs are very controversial in Nigeria at this time, and primarily for health reasons to start with, being associated to issues around infertility or certain disorders within the body. There's also the environmental factors and issues pertaining to complete transparency with its regulation by the regulation bodies. So would you say that this is your claim for GMOs is further pushing that narrative that we do need to further enforce the introduction of GMOs in Nigeria? And what would you have to then say to the controversy around its introduction, especially from farmers and consumers alike?
Well, for me, I think the issues are neither here nor there. And there's a need for proper education. I don't think GMOs are as bad as it has been painted. I think there has been some misrepresentation, some misinformation, because around the world, part of the way in which technology is used to increase productivity in agriculture is through this genetic engineering. And if it's as bad as that, I don't think that it's going to be as widespread as it is around the world in terms of agricultural productivity. And I know that with proper investigation, with proper management, the health risk involved in this GMO products and genetic engineering can be mitigated. It is a technology issue. It can be mitigated substantially. And I know that the agency responsible for this has even tried to explain this. But again, there is this perception that GMO is bad completely. I think we need to change that perception. And I don't think that it is as injurious as it has been painted, And if there is any risk to it, I think there should be a way to mitigate the risk. So for me, we can't, for a population of over 200 million people, we cannot completely avoid the use of technology. I agree with you, it's a bit controversial. But, there are arguments on both sides. There are arguments for and arguments against. But we need to validate all those fears that have been expressed around this genetic engineering.
All right.
But my concern is that technology is critical to improving agricultural productivity. We can't run away from that.
All right. Mr. Alabi?
All right.
I'm sure you want to weigh in on the number of the issues very quickly, please.
Okay. When we are talking about food security in Nigeria, Dr. Muda had made mention of a whole lot, but I want to dwell on this thing. Now, majority of our rural roads, they are not motorable at all. For example, where we are in Ogun State, in part of Ogun State, every year we make sure that we rehabilitate the road 2 times in a year.
By yourself?
By ourselves, not from any government, not from any. We do it. Davidola as a company always do that. Not just because of us, but because of other farmers, rural farmers, who also planting pineapple, pepper, planting cassava, and other agricultural produce. Because most of the time, after the harvest, the road is too bad for them to take it to the market. Most of the time, the vehicle that's supposed to come to the farm to come and carry, they won't come because they said the road is not motorable. So most of the time, maybe they have about 1,000 kg, and at the end, they could not take more than 200 or 100 kg to the market because the road is bad. So one of the things that government can do, we cannot overemphasize infrastructure in agribusiness, in food security in Nigeria, because we are producing. That is the fact. But 50% of the production is lost to post-harvest waste because the roads to the farms are not motorable. Now, coming to the GMO and technology, we cannot rule out technology in increasing our productivity when it comes to food security in Nigeria. But the GMO is not the way out, because whatever you eat is what you become. So there are other ways. Now, let's talk about land. We have more than enough land.
Yeah, just very quickly, because we're...
Okay, we have more than enough land in Nigeria. For example, let me go quickly.
Harvest is plenty, but
harvest is plenty.
few.
So we need to educate our youth and make agricultural sector farming a kind of attractive to our youth. And when we have everything that we need to make sure that we have enough food in Nigeria without doing GMO.
Okay, all right, Ambassador Segun Alabi and Dr. Muda Yusuf, we want to thank you so much for joining us on the morning show today. This is a huge topic. I'm sure that we'll return to it soon some other time. I thank you indeed for joining us.